The gods would held the day's last light like a secret cupped in red leaves. Wind hissed in the boughs, and the heart tree's pale trunk seemed to drink the hush. Caitlin came along the stepping stones, her boots barely marking the damp moss, and she found her husband seated at the root of the weirwood with the letter open on his knee. The seal was broken, the green wax crushed into a smear on the rough paper. He had read it once, twice, and now his gaze had gone beyond the page and into the reflecting pool where the sky's bruised edge gathered. She knelt beside him and pressed her fingers to the back of his hand. It was cold as iron. "She says they killed him," she whispered, though there was no one to overhear but the trees. "She says it plain, Ned. She says many things," he murmured. "And my brother of the Vale is dead all the same." The ravens had brought the news of John Arryn in the spring rains. They had brought the king as well, with his laughter and his appetite and the red-headed bastards of tales that came and went like smoke. But the letter had come from beyond the high passes, a thin thing that smelled faintly of beeswax, and Lysa had bent her flowing hand around the same blade that had cut the world. "They murdered my husband," she had written. "The Lannisters. They killed him because he learned the truth. Come not to King's Landing. They will do the same to you." Caitlin turned her face to the heart tree and let the tightness behind her eyes be as brief as a cloud shadow. "It is Lysa. She sees daggers in a feast knife," she said, and then lower. And yet. Ned folded the letter with care, the kind of care he would give a sword he would never sheathe again. "The king will have my answer by dawn," he said. "He asks his friend to serve his hand. I cannot slight him in his grief. If the Lannisters have blackened their hands, I'll see it, not hear it." "And our children?" Caitlin asked, though she knew the rhythm of his sense and the measure of his duty. "The north is their fortress. Winterfell will keep them," he said. "And you, Cat, I would sooner leave them in the snows than at the mercy of courtiers." She touched the folded letter again. "Lysa would have us all shut up behind the bloody gate, the mountains to wall us from every fear. She will not lift so much as a finger to any cause that pulls her from her boy's side. She may lift a finger to save herself," Ned mused, a line between his brows deepening, "or to spite those she hates. Lysa hates the Lannisters. She hated them long before John died, and she hates them now as one hates a winter that stole a child." He turned, the weirwood's red leaves scratching lightly against his shoulder. "The Vale has gulls and grain and ships at Gulltown. The narrow sea carries more than stories. Cat, you were born in Riverrun. You know what flows along a river. King's Landing is a river mouth. Salt or fresh, its belly is made of what is sent down to it." Caitlin followed his thought across distances she could measure on her palms. "You would ask Lysa to starve the Lannisters." "I would ask Lysa," Ned said. "To remember John's last duty was to the realm. She is regent for his heir. She is sworn to the king. If the queen plays games with knives in the dark, it is not treason to take the knives from her kitchen." "You mean to be hand," Caitlin said, "and set a table where Lysa brings the bread." His mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. "She will not march the Knights of the Vale if every mountain peak stood up and called her name," he said. "But she may shut her harbor. She may direct Lord Grafton to hold ships in Gulltown on any pretext of robbers, storm season, tariffs. She may keep the Vale's grain stacked in her storehouses instead of drifting down to the Blackwater. The city eats the Vale's bread. Deny it, and those in the Red Keep who imagine they feed us all will feel their bellies knot." "She will ask why," Caitlin said. "Lysa is a bird that sings the song she is taught, and there is another bird who has taught her." "Littlefinger," Ned said, and there was no love in the name. "He has gulls of his own, but he loved you once, and loves her like a man loves a fever. If I cannot reach Lysa, perhaps I can reach the chain around her ankle." Caitlin lifted her eyes to the heart tree's face. Its red eyes wept the same as always. "Write to her," she said, "to Lysa as a sister, and to Bronze Yon as a lord who remembers his oaths. They cannot bear to be told what to do. Ask them to do what they think they decided." "And you?" Ned asked, his voice softer in the dimming. "Will you trust me to go into the south again?" "I have always trusted you, stubborn man," she said. "I will send prayers after you, like arrows." He squeezed her fingers. The darkness folded like a cloak around the godswood. The next day ravens rose from the maester's tower, north and east and south. The king hunted in the rills and laughed until his belly shook, and a black bird with a gray ribbon tied to its leg beat onward into the mountain winds. The eyrie was like a slice cut from the moon. Lysa Arryn held her son beneath a feather quilt in a chamber whose windows had no shutters because the air was the wall. She had slept badly. She always slept badly unless Sweetrobin's breath warmed her throat. The maester had left sweet milk in a heavy cup. She had sipped it, licked the sugar from her lip, and felt her thoughts come lined in silk. Servants moved as quietly as night's forgotten footsteps. When the raven came, she startled and gripped her boy's arm so hard he whimpered. She had not wished to be disturbed. The letter broke that wish with the neat insistence of Ned Stark's hand. Lysa read and read again, and her mouth made a thin line as if she were clamping it around the words. He didn't write of knives or murder. He didn't write the ugly names she whispered in her sleep. He wrote of the king's summons, of his own duty, and then he wrote of ships. Ships, grain, Gulltown. A law tightly construed and quietly enforced that no Vale ship would load sacks bound for the Blackwater until the regent rescinded the order. A wary watch over smugglers. A levy on foreign ships docking in Gulltown, doubled and tripled for those that wore a lion on their sails. And a thought disguised as concern. The royal fleet had grown idle and thin in the city's harbor. The streets were dangerous. He feared for the safety of Gulltown's sailors. Better to keep them at home. He asked it as a favor. He asked it for the realm. He asked it for Jon. She hugged her son until he squawked and patted at her chain necklace. She would have flung the letter into the brazier, but she knew better now. She had learned, hadn't she? She had learned after the bright blood on a feather bed. There are things one does to keep a boy alive in a world of men. Peter came to her in the solar, uninvited as smoke. He liked to stand with his back to the light so that his eyes seemed darker. Lysa lifted the letter and waved it like a pennon. "He asks me to help him rule," she said. "He asks me to strangle the city." She laughed, a thin sound. "I do not wish to go to war, Peter. I will not send the knights, not for him or any man." "Of course you will not," he murmured, and he placed a hand over his heart in a pantomime so deft it seemed sincere. "The mountains are your armor. The boy is your treasure. The world is cold and unkind. But there are wars you may win from your chair." Lysa's eyes softened. "You said the same once, when Jon would have me travel to King's Landing again," she said. "You said my son would sicken and die on the river road. You were right, always right. I only ever wanted your safety," he said, and the smile died before it could be born. He took the letter lightly by its corner. "It would inconvenience certain men if the Vale's ships carried less weight," he said. "Nothing more. Let gulls eat lions' leavings. Lord Grafton is compliant when he is paid. Nestor Royce is steady as winter. Bronze Yon will huff because he enjoys the shape his breath makes, but he is not master in Gulltown. Neither is Ser Lyn Corbray, though his sword has a history it recites whenever he drinks. The law is yours to interpret." Lysa watched his mouth shape the world into smaller, safer pieces. "Ned says for Jon," she whispered. "Then do it for Jon," Peter said very gently. "And keep the knights of the Vale home." Wouldn't Jon have kept his knights home? Had he known the danger? He was too brave for his life. He let his gaze drop to her son, where the boy played with a pewter falcon and a handful of sugar almonds. "For the boy," he added. "For our boy." She signed the orders with a hand that trembled and then grew very still. When Lord Grafton knelt before her the next morning beside Nestor Royce in the High Hall, she spoke like a woman speaking to a window, clear, firm, and unanswering. Tariffs increased, licenses reviewed, and for now, only now. No sack of grain would leave Gulltown for the Blackwater until the regent saw fit. There had been reports of pirates along the narrow sea. She would not send her sailors to their deaths, nor allow the Vale's prosperity to be lost to rumors of war. She wished the king well. When the time was right, she would unsnarl the windings of law again. Bronze Yon's beard bristled like a hedgerow in a storm. "This smells of fear," he said bluntly. "It smells of prudence," Lysa replied, and her knuckles were white on the arm of her chair. "Go to your hills, Lord Royce, and defend my passes if your sword aches for work." Nestor Royce watched her as one watches a snow cornice above a path. He said nothing until he had walked her long gallery with Peter trailing behind like a shadow. "Do not cut off the city of the king we are sworn to," he said low. "A trickle now becomes a habit later." "We are cutting no throats," Peter said softly. "We are only declining to fill them with honey." Gulltown is a gull's eye and a gull's cry and the salt sourness that folds itself around the throat of a sailor who has been at sea too long. Lord Grafton's sigil flew above his tower, and the harbor lay like a handled bowl, one side of which the sea had gnawed and the other the city's walls had gripped. Word ran along the docks as it always runs, faster than feet, sparser than bread. A Vale levy meant every sack would be dearer, and dear goods travel by night. The first two ships turned away from loading gave a collective affronted cough and raised their sails for bravos instead. The third, devilish and shifty, tried to take on wheat after midnight. The harbor watch boarded her and came away with a handful of coins that had grease on them. By the end of the week, the warehouses above the quay were quieter. By the end of two, the rackety string of cogs that usually threaded the narrow sea south toward Duskendale, Driftmark, the Blackwater, were fewer. A bulky Bravosi trader came, argued, unloaded dyes and soap, and sailed without touching a bag of flour. Grain prices crept like ivy. The sea thought of storms and the gulls thought of nothing but screaming. King's Landing breathed with difficulty at the best of times. It breathed with a choke when the ships didn't come. The small council gathered with their cups and parchments, and the thickness of the city pressed up against the windows like a beggar's hand. Ned stood and listened and said little. He could feel the heat baking the stone and the flies licking the fruit in honeyed bowls while Pycelle explained that the markets in Rosby and Stokeworth would suffice. Renly, with his bright look, made a joke about the appetites of the city and how no man was satisfied who did not have the red keep to season his soup. Peter Baelish, lazy in his chair as a cat in a sun puddle, ran numbers like a man rubbing coins together his whole life. Varys spoke last, sweet and powdery as a pastry that might hide a knife. "A letter fro. The Vale, my lord hand," he said. "My little birds tell me the regent there has found her conscience in matters of maritime safety. It is wise, perhaps, when pirates flourish as they are said to." He fluttered a hand. "I would not wish Lord Grafton's sailors to fall afoul of some Lyseni brigand." "Does the realm have pirates now?" Renly asked. "I shall order you a cushion for that powder, Varys. You may sit upon it while you tell us of all the dangers that keep your birds so busied." "Oh, many," Varys said. "Even the sea is not what it was when we were boys." He turned the pale moons of his eyes to Ned. "The city has bread for a fortnight at present consumption, my lord. The rains will send mildew if the storehouses are not aired. A press of people at the baker's doors." "Yes, I have seen that too." Ned kept his hands from clenching by keeping them flat on the table. "Master of coin," he said to Peter, "can you buy grain in Duskendale, Rosby, Stokeworth, and bring it to the city?" "If I must," Peter said, "but at a price the bakers will not praise. We might consider—" His smile was soft as wool. "We might consider asking the good regent of the Vale to loosen her bindings. I am acquainted with Gulltown's masters. Could be done quietly, for a fee." "Ask her if you like," Ned said, eyes steady. "I have already asked." Peter's glance flickered as a fish flickers, showing a gleam and gone. "Have you?" "I have asked as a friend," Ned said. "I have asked as a man whose brother by oath is dead, and whose children eat the bread of those who are not our friends." He let his breath out gently. "Lord Varys, speak to the harbor master. We will pay what coin we must, and we will keep the peace." "The gold cloaks?" Janos Slint grunted from his seat by the wall. "Do not eat peace, they eat bread. My men will not march for rats." "They will march," Ned said. and he let the cold from some northern place come into his voice, the way a lake takes back its light when a cloud passes. And they will keep their hands from the loaves, or their hands will be lighter by a thumb. Slint didn't like it, but he liked gold better than he liked insolence. Peter counted silently. Varys lowered his eyes. Renly watched, amused as if at a play where he knew all the lines but didn't like the ending. Ned spent his mornings in the Tower of the Hand sorting paper and men like so much chaff. He walked the city when he had an hour, and the city told him the truth better than any counsel. The alley where a fishwife slapped a boy for stealing. The long line at a bakery in Cobbler's Square. The stinking gates where ships barely coughed up any men with rope burns on their hands. He watched the Red Keep from an angle that made it look like a toy. The heat lay like a blanket. He could taste old wine and new anger on the air. When the king laughed now, it was with an edge that said he heard the scrape of knives somewhere in a memory he didn't want. Robert left for the Kingswood to hunt boar. He liked to forget. Cersei did not forget. She called her brothers to her in rooms that smelled of rose oil and called the city a whore that ate too much. "It will be a poor city that eats no bread," Tyrion observed dryly when Ser Jaime complained about the price of flour for his men's ration. Tyrion's nose twitched. He had a gift for tasting the sourness in soup. "And poorer still are the men who try to take bread from poor men," he added. "Beggar fights and bread riots make for ugly play." Cersei's smile could have come from a statue. "We have gold. Gold melts in hot mouths," Tyrion said. "But we have gold to buy ships, perhaps. Ships carry grain when permitted to carry grain. The Vale has decided to be coy." "The Vale has decided to be insolent," Jaime said, weighing his sword belt as if the leather itself would tell him where to cut. "I could cut off the fingers at the knuckle. Teach these mountain men to kneel." Cersei looked at him with a fondness that had teeth. "You could cut off every hilltop in the Vale and the sea would still be between us," she said. "I want the bread in the city, not a pile of rocks on which you stand proudly." She turned to her little brother. "Can this be undone? Lysa is mad. But mad women have to be managed differently than sane ones." "We could ask Peter Baelish," Tyrion said mildly, traveling the room with his small eyes to see where the shadows were piled. "He grew up on a strip of rock beneath the Vale's shadow. He should know where the shadow is thin." "Ask him," Cersei said. She didn't say please. She never said please. Peter came, with his smile very polite and his hands empty. "The Lady Regent is cautious," he said. "She fears pirates and perils and the plague that is rumored in Lys." He shrugged as if he didn't mind the rumor he had invented that morning. "I'm not sure she will be persuaded to risk her ships." "She risks my patience," Cersei snapped. "What is the use of paying men who cannot do what they are paid for?" "I am underpaid," Peter said, and he made them laugh. He made them laugh until Cersei's face softened. "But I will try, for the good of the realm, for the city's bellies." "Try quickly," she said, "or I shall have Janos take his gold cloaks to Gulltown and find a way to levy their own tax on ships." "That," Peter Baelish said gently, "would be a war." The summer was a breath that caught and held. Ned's letters to the Eyrie were answered with a politeness that had stiff edges. Lysa regretted much. She consented to nothing. Lord Grafton wrote an accounting of fees collected that made Peter's mouth purse with appreciation unwillingly. Bronzione sent a separate note. "I like this not, Lord Stark. If we starve the city, we starve them all. There are boys besides Lannisters who must eat." Ned answered with northern plainness and southern subtlety. He asked nothing of the Knights of the Vale. He asked that Gulltown remain safe. He wrote Brynden Tully at Riverrun and sent the same raven a copy of Lysa's orders. The Blackfish's reply came crisp as a frosty dawn. "If the Vale won't send men, it is well that it sends me time. Tywin's needs travel across the Golden Tooth. My nephew is a boy, but the lions can't sup with both hands if their bellies are empty." Catelyn came to King's Landing once more with summer's dust on her hem and worry in her mouth. Ned met her in the tower and closed the door with his hand. He looked older, but his gaze was steady. She told him of their daughters and the household, and then she told him the second part. They have begun to grumble at Seaguard as well, she said. Lords who lived by selling grain to the city do not love tariffs. Uncle Brinden says he has to explain the strategy to men who count their coppers like prayers. Is he dubious? Ned asked. The Blackfish is a soldier. He likes a plan that has a clean edge, she said. This one is a net. I know, Ned said. He set his hands upon the map that lay unrolled across his table. But the city is a mouth that must be reminded of its jaw. They think they eat a kingdom. Let them taste hunger. They will swallow pride more easily than bread. When she left him, he stood looking over the city that lay below like a sprawl of thread that had been dropped by a careless seamstress. In the halls of the Red Keep he moved with care. The stones whispered. He spoke courteously to the queen and sealed his courtesy with ice. He kept Robert from complaining too loudly. He watched Renly's bright laughter slide over shadows like oil over scraped wood. He made quiet arrangements with Port Reeves up and down the Crownlands. A fast galley left Rosby by night. In the morning, it was seized by King's Landing men and its cargo diverted to the King's stores. Slint smiled like a miller counting sacks. Give the baker's coin, Ned told Peter Baelish. If they cannot spend it on grain, they'll spend it on riots. The city will eat its own houses if you let it. I do so love it when you give me money to make problems vanish, Peter said. What would you like me to do with the money you do not have? See you do not steal it, Ned said. He could not be everywhere. He was in the throne room when news came that Gregor Clegane had put torch to a village on the Red Fork. He was looking at the ceiling when Pycelle extolled the justice of the new judge the Hand had appointed, and he saw the pattern of leaves carved there and thought of leaves frozen underfoot. In the weeks when the king hunted and the queen sulked and Renly made parties of his guardhouse, the smell of the city sharpened. Bread lines grew longer. The men who stood in them grew surlier. A gold cloak shoved a man who had nothing but bones under his skin. The man looked at the brass discs and put his handful of crust in his mouth as if the gold cloak had not spoken. Varys came soft-footed and reported on the mood in the streets like a nurse discussing a fever. It is not yet crisis, he said. It is leverage, Ned murmured, and Varys's glance was keen even through the powder. Handled clumsily, it becomes a club, Varys said. Handled well, a lever. And if a club is what is needed, Ned said, to knock a knife out of someone's hand? Varys's lips smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. You are not a man who likes bruising. I do not, Ned said, and the admission was iron. Shortly after, a great boar gored a king. The forest bled and the sky wept, and Robert's breaths were a sloppy wet sound under the bandage. Ned sat with him and the smell of wine, blood, and rose oil was so heavy he wanted to retch. Robert was dying. The city would be hungry and leaderless at the same time. When the king summoned him alone, there was no one to lie with honeyed words between them. Ned knelt. Robert spoke haltingly but clear. He wanted to hunt again. He made a last will. He said the name he could not otherwise stomach. Stannis. The parchment took the letters in its patient skin. Robert raved about a boar. He spoke of children as if they were deer he had not hewn. He died. The light left his skin as gradually as a receding tide. The day Robert died, Lord Grafton's men seized a Lyseni brig with veil grain in her belly and a lion banner sewn inside the captain's mattress. 3 men hanged over Gulltown's eastern wall. It mattered to no one in King's Landing, and yet it mattered to everyone. Peter Baelish whispered quietly that the queen had taken her children into the inner part of the keep. Renly vanished with the Night of Flowers, and his laughter went with him. Stannis sailed to Dragonstone with ships that owed their first loyalty to the sea. Ned knew, as one knows the exact weight of a sword he has held all his life, that the hinge of the world had turned. The pressure he had applied, quiet, steady, now held the city like a door that might swing either way depending on how one leaned. He sent for Janos Slint in the hour before dawn. He sent for Varys and did not send for Peter. The gold cloaks keep the peace, Ned said. They keep order in the streets and obey the law. The law requires that the king's will be obeyed. The king's will is this. He held out the will, and Slint squinted as if letters vexed him. The king named his brother Stannis as regent and protector until the rightful heir comes of age. The boy on the throne's a king, Slint said. He sits on it. I saw him. He looked well. He is a child, Ned said. A child's right to sit there depends on the law. Take your men and stand ready. At my word, you will keep the peace and obey the law. You will arrest no man this day without hearing my voice give the order in your ear. Is that clear? Slint's face was a pudding. It trembled. Clear, he said finally. After Slint came Peter, smiling, and Ned could smell the ointment he used to keep his beard in good temper. Ah, Peter said. I should have brought a mourning ribbon. So much black this morning. In the throne room, Nedis. Aid. Do nothing. I do many things best when I do nothing, Peter murmured, and he tipped his head. Your friends in the Vale have accomplished what you asked. The city is malleable. Perhaps it is too malleable. Janos will be more malleable if he is paid. I can see to that. I have seen to it, Ned said. My friends in the Vale have coin as well as grain. Peter blinked slowly. You sent coin, he said, from the man who has none. Not coin to lend you, Ned said. Coin to buy men who would otherwise be yours. Peter's smile didn't flicker. It was like watching a thin sheet of ice not crack. Dear gods, Eddard, you have learned something of King's Landing. I learned to watch your hands, Ned said. The throne room that day shone the way a blade shines. Sunlight speared through the high windows and made the dust dance like fine-spun silk. The boy on the throne carried his chin too high. Cersei stood with her hand on his shoulder and looked at the world as if it had already obeyed her. Jaime lounged at the base of the steps, too proud to pretend to crane his neck. Pycelle made a little croaking noise that might have been a prayer and might have been indigestion. Varys watched everything like a spider feeling the smallest twitch in his web. Ned stood where a hand stands. He did not kneel. He held Robert's will and Robert's ring and Robert's memory between his ribs like a brand. He spoke gently, because his words were sharp and he was not cruel. He read the letter. He said the name Stannis. He said protector. He did not say bastard. He did not say incest. He did not say. Cersei's smile was sweet. She took the parchment and tore it into 4 neat shreds and let them fall like leaves. A piece of paper, she said. No man eats paper. No, Ned agreed. Men eat bread. He let the quiet grow until even Jaime's mouth tightened. The city eats because the realm sends grain. The realm sends less every day. The Vale sends none at all. He lifted his chin. If we fight this in the streets, your son will taste the city's hunger. If we do it in the law, he may taste a crown that is not broken. You bring us threats, Cersei murmured. I bring you truth, Ned said. Hunger is truth. You will not leave this room, Jaime said lazily. With your head still on your shoulders. I will walk out with the law, Ned said. And he said, quietly and clearly, Ser Barristan. Ser Barristan stepped forward, old and bright as a winter morning. I have been a Kingsguard longer than you have been a king, my lady, he said to Cersei. I have guarded the son as I guarded the father. I have seen kings go from good to cruel. The law is my wall. I will not set it aside. Cersei's color sharpened. Janos, she said. Ned looked toward the doors where the gold cloaks stood like a line of coins. Janos Slint had the sense not to look at anyone. The gold cloaks did not raise their spears. They didn't move. A mutter ran through the hall like a wind in dry grass. You think this city will hold for you, Cersei said to Ned. You think you can starve us into kneeling? I think the city will hold for itself, Ned said. And I think the wolves of the Golden Tooth will learn they cannot feed 2 mouths with 1 steak. Littlefinger, Cersei said. Peter Baelish smiled his soft smile. He looked like a man about to juggle. My lady, he said. Ned's hand went to his sword, and he felt the worn leather under his palm. He did not draw. He felt the moment like a bridge under his foot. Arrest the queen, he said. The room is a world. In this world, gold cloaks sometimes look at their captain, and their captain looks at the man who paid him last. Janos Slint's tongue worked in his mouth like a worm in a cut apple. He made a sound that wasn't yes, and then he made a sound that was. The gold cloaks moved. The Kingsguard drew. Peter took a step that would put him behind someone. Ser Barristan drew, and the light caught his blade as if it were honest steel and not the idea of a sword. Jaime smiled, and his blade came hissing up. There are fights that go in one heartbeat and last a year in the head. Ned's men moved as one. Tomard's blade met that of a Lannister guard with a sound like a bell. The gold cloaks kept their line and put their spear points between Queen and Kingsguard and the throne and the hand alike. Stand! Janos bellowed, and they stood. Ser Barristan's eyes were full of winter. Lay down your sword, Ser Jaime, he said. He spoke to Jaime as if speaking to his own memory. You lay down yours first, Jaime said conversationally. You will not cut down a boy to keep your sister's place, Ned told him. I'll cut down a realm for her, Jaime said almost cheerfully, but he looked past Ned at his sister and saw her face, the line of her mouth, and he remembered, perhaps, that the city's food chests were emptier than they ought to be, and that bread riots burnt men no matter their name. He sheathed his sword with the insolence of a man who made his own rules and knew it, but he sheathed it. Cersei did not move when the gold cloaks took her weapons. She let them pin her sleeves with rough fingers. She said, in a whisper that carried anyway, "You will die for this. All of you." "Perhaps," Ned said. They took her to a tower chamber where even the rose oil could not drown the lay of old stone. Joffrey shouted and kicked and called for heads and then ran into a corridor where no one came when he called. Tommen cried. Myrcella watched with eyes that had learned too much too soon. Afterward, the hall breathed. Ser Barristan leaned his forehead against the cool of a pillar. Janos Slynt wiped his mouth on the back of his hand and took his pay twice over. Peter Baelish smiled at Ned as if both of them had won some quiet game. "You have chosen your lever well," Peter murmured. "One can move stones with a lever. One can also crush one's own foot." "Choose your feet carefully, Peter," Ned said. Varys approached. Like a scent. "The city is sated with spectacle," he said. "Shall we give it bread?" "Call in the bakers," Ned said. "Open the king's stores. Buy at any price in the crownlands. Send what coin is necessary to Duskendale. And send a raven to Gulltown. Tell them the queen is held until the law is satisfied. The city's bellies will be filled and the realm spared." "Confession on the morrow?" Varys asked in the light tone of a man suggesting tea. "No," Ned said. He was tired in his bones, the kind of tired that feels like a clear day after snow. "The law, not confession. We will send for Stannis. We will convene a council of lords. And we will not tear a boy from his bed and drown him in politics. Joffrey will be kept in confinement too. He is a child." Catelyn was not at his side for the weeks following, and in that he felt the ache even as he worked at the loom of men and laws. Ravens carried more weight than soldiers. In the Vale, Lysa received news that made her breath quicken. The queen shut in the red keep like a jeweled bird, the hand telling the city it would eat. She clutched Peter's sleeve too tightly and left marks. "Their bread will return to them now," she whispered. "If they behave," Peter said, and watched the veil with eyes that slipped along surfaces looking for the places to insert a thin blade. Bronze Yohn Royce heard the news in his hall and grunted with surprise that he did not trouble to hide. "Stark has steel, then," he said, "and the law for his shield. Good. I am sick to death of Lannisters eating roast dove while my sister's plowmen count coppers for oatcakes." He sent for ravens and sent them flying to every lord of the Vale who remembered a time before fear feathered Lysa's words. He did not ask for the knights to ride yet. He asked for ships. Lord Grafton sent 3 heavily built cogs south under Knight's Vale with guards who knew their work. They bore grain and a parchment naming a price that would make a sharp-toothed man whistle. Ned opened the Red Keep's royal granaries to give the city a day's ease. It bought him time to bring in the ships from Duskendale and Rosby. The bakers cheered coin more than they cheered law. The bread lines shortened a little. Men scowled less. The city breathed, shallow but not choking. Ned had bought the moment he needed. News moves along riverbanks and under arches and in courtyards where women scrub linens. It moved into Riverrun, and it moved through the Golden Tooth, where Tywin Lannister sharpened his displeasure to a point. He learned of the Queen taken and the city held in a hand he could not cut without losing fingers. He learned that the bread he had counted upon as a tool was being used against him. "He has a wife of river blood," Tywin said to his captains, and his voice was a soft rasp. Around him banners hung as still as a held breath. "He has the Vale's ships and coin to hire men who should be ours. He will think himself clever. He is not clever. He is stubborn. Stubborn men are predictable. Predictable men are dangerous," Kevin murmured. "One can only tempt unpredictable men." Tywin's mouth thinned. "Send Ser Gregor north again. The boy Robb will come when he smells smoke. The old man Hoster will send for his son. The Riverlands will be too busy to feed a northern wolf's ambitions and a Vale's protestations both." The mountain went out, and the villages on the Red Fork and Tumblestone felt a tremor that turned into hoofbeats and fire. Riverrun answered with steel. Hoster Tully coughed blood and raged at the ceiling, while Edmure tried to be the river's source and the river's mouth at the same time. The Blackfish smiled without mirth and set outriders like needles into a hemline. The raiders could not easily feed themselves with the river's people throwing mud into their bread ovens. War took men away from their plows and then from their lives. But the Vale's lever had its longer reach. Gulltown's ships choked the Narrows with legality. House Grafton's men carried stamped parchments that worried captains with more force than cutlasses. The gold cloaks, made rich and kept in crusts, stood straighter and accepted less coin they hadn't counted. They had begun to like being paid enough. Peter Baelish slipped his smile under doors and found more than one shut in his face. A new and rare experience. He adjusted. That was his gift. He began to speak softly to other men instead. Men who wore red in their cloaks and lions on their rings. "You see," he said to Tyrion, who had an ale cup in his hand and looked as if he trusted it more than he trusted the room. "Honor learns just enough to be useful. It will learn too much and become foolish again. Watch. Every man holds a lever in a different place. The hand's is bread. Your father's is fear. You, I think, have one of words. Not truths. Words." Tyrion snorted into his cup. "I prefer a lever that fits my shoulder. The law is heavy. Bread is crumbly. Fear breaks at inopportune times." He tilted the cup. "Words. I can move words all day and the world sits there and is not moved. Then a baker raises his price and suddenly the world stirs." In the Red Keep, Cersei paced her chamber like a lioness caged for a crowd that had not come. She spoke with Pycelle, and he made the noises of a man who had parched herbs under his bed and thought them remedies. Jaime came to her when he could, his laugh as careless as he could make it. They were careful even with each other's carelessness. The walls had ears, and the ears had little shoes that took what they heard down to a certain room where Varys fed them candied plums and put their words in jars. Ned called a council of lords who could be compelled to come. Men from the Crownlands, a handful from the Stormlands who had not fled to Stannis or Renly, slow-witted lords whose heads were turned by ceremony and quick-witted ones whose heads were turned by opportunity. He spoke of the law, asked them to sign papers, and they sign. Ed, because men like to be on the side of the handwriting that looks most confident. He sent ravens to Dragonstone. Stannis's answer came back with salt in it. He would come when the sea permitted, and he would bring with him a list of wrongs as long as a winter night. Ned showed the list to Ser Barristan, who read it with an expression like an old wound felt in rain. "He is not wrong," the old knight said. "He is only Stannis, which is like being a sword in a world of bread knives," Ned said. "We must not cut the city to ribbons while we teach it to slice properly." Ser Barristan looked at him as if to say, "I did not think the North bred such men, but perhaps the snow polishes as well as it chills." Bronze Yohn Royce came down from the Vale at last, with a small escort and a great presence. He stood in the Tower of the Hand and spoke with the plainness of a man who had the mountains at his back. He did not love King's Landing and made no effort to hide it. "You have done a thing," he said to Ned. "It is not the kind of thing men like me cherish, but it has checked the Lannisters, which is a thing I cherish." "It will not hold forever," Ned said. "The Tyrells have ships. The Redwyne fleet is a sea to itself. If they move to the Lannisters' tune, our lever breaks. I have bought weeks, perhaps months. Time enough to set the law in place and the city quiet, the Royce Lord said. I carry with me the promise of further shipments, and one of my men is of Lord Templeton's family. 9 stars will send wine if not wheat. The city can live on wine if it must. He grinned suddenly, like a man remembering he once liked to laugh. It will not like it. They do not like anything that is not sweet and easy, Ned said, and then checked himself because he sounded like a man speaking of his children to strangers. I mean the city, he added, and Yon's grin widened. I know what you mean, Stark. How fares your lady? She is at Riverrun now, Ned said. Her father is ill. Hoster Tully dying is like a mountain breaking along a fault no one saw, Yon said. We will all feel the dust in our lungs. He looked out the window at the glitter of the bay. I like your leverage. I like better an agreement made at a table. The veil will not be the king's purse nor the hand's cudgel. Not forever. But for now, this was a clean tug. And when the Lannisters cut the knot? Ned asked. We will see whether the knife in their hand does not cut the hand, Yon said, content. Cersei Caged is a lioness made human. She will have to be clever and careful, and that is not her first gift. Gulltown's docks continued their quiet business of not doing. The city ate a little better and felt a little safer, though it remained a place where the wrong hand on a knife could redesign a life. Ned slept still clothed some nights, the bed having turned into a piece of furniture he visited rather than used. He saw in dreams the snow across the winter town. He saw his daughters walking as if in a hall of mirrors, Sansa bright and careful where she had to be bright, Arya darting quick as a thought. He missed their faults the way one misses a favored ache. It tells you where you are. He woke with the taste of cold in his mouth and the city back in his throat like dust. On a day that smelled of torches and fish, Stannis Baratheon's sails appeared, and the Red Keep remembered it had vows engraved on its stones. Stannis came like a black line across the water, and with him came his frown and his book of wrongs and his fury that tasted more like bitter pride than anger. He and Ned clasped hands like men clasping a rung on a ladder they must both climb whether they like it or not. The law, Stannis said by way of greeting. The law, Ned agreed. They sat in a council chamber where no women listened and no spy dared breathe too loudly. Stannis flicked the list and watched Ned's face as if watching a blade to see where it would bend. Ned read. Some of the wrongs were Cersei's. Some were Robert's. Some were the city's. Some belonged to the very rot in the walls that made men think bricks could keep out consequence. Ned set the list down and breathed. We will judge her, he said. Publicly, Stannis said. Without drama. With language that a farmer can understand.
Ned nodded.
The judge would be the law. Ser Barristan would be the sword that did not need to be raised. The city would be fed. The lords would be obliged. The queen would be stripped of those things that made her dangerous. Her children would be reconciled to a new arrangement. Cersei stood before their power wrapped in silk and flameless rage. She did not tremble. She had more courage than many men. She only believed herself above a world that had chosen to try, for a little while, to be fair. They did not ask her if she had an incestuous bed to share. They asked her what she had done with the king's authority. They asked why she had armed men in the streets beyond the watch. Why she had stayed the levies meant for the city's stores. Why she had sought to buy grain through secret deals that bled the crown's purse. She insulted them less than she could have. She was not foolish. She called the whole business a farce and a usurpation. She invoked Robert's ghost as if he had ever been a ghost in a chamber where living breath smoked. When the verdict came down, it did not take her head. Took what she loved nearly as well. It banished her from the capital. It gave her children into the custody of the crown now defined as Stannis' regency and Ned's hand. It forbade her from living at Casterly Rock under penalty of attainder against whoever harbored her. It ordered her to return to her father to negotiate peace on terms that began with an end to burning on the Red Fork. You cannot take my children, Cersei said. Your children are the king's children, Stannis said in a voice that had boulders in it. We will not harm them. We will teach them. You, We'll make them dull, she snapped. We will make them live, Ned said, and something in his tone made even her blink, because she expected righteousness and found something plain as bread. Jaime came to him later, and to Stannis, and his laugh was gone like the last coin in a poor man's purse. He offered himself as a hostage for the Queen's safe conduct, and for once neither of the men he despised thought to refuse him. It suited them too well. It made too much sense. He gambled himself and smiled with that savage not smile that says a man has chosen his fate and will try to act like he chose it in a tavern rather than a trap. There was a time of unease and ugly compromise. The city ate. The Queen rode out under guard. Men threw mud and words but no stones. Janos Slint hung 2 men who tried to shout her murder aloud. Peter Baelish counted, and he counted again, and he moved numbers as if they were gulls. He found he could not recreate the flock he had once commanded. He adjusted, moved to other perches, whispered to other lords, including some who wore a stag instead of a lion. Tyrion left the city one night with 2 strangers who were braver than honest. He laughed a great deal in the dark. He rode to his father. Tywin measured his son's words and found them not wanting. He did not smile. He did not change his aim. He did, however, move it minutely to a place less likely to shatter on a rock. Riverrun held. Tywin's retreat, when it came, looked like a change of plan rather than a defeat. Men wise enough to live in such times called it both. Robb Stark did not ride south. He paced Winterfell with a wolf who had grown and with sisters who grew differently. When letters came from their father, they smelled of wax and iron and words. Sansa read them and learned the taste of patience. Arya read them and learned the taste of waiting while sharpening knives in her head. In the Vale, Lysa sang to her boy and stared into the mountains like a woman who had looked down once and regretted very much how the world looks from a height. Bronze Yohn kept up an iron talk that made the Vale's lords feel themselves more than a nest of frightened birds. Nestor Royce counted stores and found the numbers good. Lord Grafton made a profit that was simply part of being alive. Peter visited less often. He found that the wind carried his scent differently in the Vale now. He began to tell himself stories about winter and how the cold always makes men smaller. A winter rain fell on King's Landing and steamed off the cobbles. Ned walked the ramparts and Stannis walked beside him like a comment in the margin. "You used the city's belly," Stannis said. He did not say it with reproach. It was almost admiration, but Stannis does not do admiration the way other men do. It sounds like a diagnosis. "I used what was there," Ned said, "and I did not cut when I could persuade." "It will not make you beloved," Stannis said. "I have not wished to be beloved since I was a boy," Ned said. "I have wished to be at peace with myself." He thought of Robert's laugh like a bell struck, of Cersei's eyes when she heard the verdict, of Jaime's face when he offered himself. He thought of the city's hands around loaves and the way men stand when they do not fear they will be shoved from behind. "The law is not everything," Stannis said after a time. "No," Ned said, "but it is the thing we have when the bread runs out." They stood looking at the sea. It had churned them both in different ways. Ships went and came under their watch without ceremony. The Red Keep breathed easier than it had in months. The lever had turned, and though it never moved the realm as much as some would say, it had kept it from falling into a pit whose sides could not be climbed. Tywin Lannister held council in a hall that had seen more restraint than remonstrance in its long life. He listened to letters read aloud. Jaime safe under guard in the city. The Queen en route to the west. The bread flowing again through the city's markets under watchmen who weren't his. He thought of leverage and law and how men like Eddard Stark rarely lived long in the south. He placed a finger on the rim of a cup and watched how a tremor of the finger could make the wine move without spilling. "We will wait," he said, "and when we move, we will move like a rockslide." He would. That was his nature. But for now he waited. The Riverlands rebuilt what had been burned. The Vale's tariffs loosened as Lysa discovered that power was not simply the holding on but knowing when to let go. Gulltown became a harbor where ships came and were inspected as a matter of course and paid ritual fees and sailed without backroom bargains. The bakers of King's Landing learned to cut their loaves fairly in front of the line rather than behind, because gold cloaks now counted and expected to be counted in turn. Varys fed his little birds and smiled around plums and wondered whether the game had changed, or only the arrangement of pieces. On a morning that would be called clear if it were not in King's Landing, a girl ran with a loaf under her arm and did not fear being clubbed away from it. Arya would have preferred running with a stick, but she was in Winterfell learning other lessons there. Sansa had learned to keep her head high while walking the same walls her father walked. That was later. For now, a baker wiped his hands and looked at a gold cloak, and both of them nodded, as if to say that a lever had been tried and had not snapped. When Ned returned to the Tower of the Hand that night, he found a letter waiting with no seal and a certain perfume in the paper, as if someone had thought about using it and then thought better. He opened it and read Peter Baelish's neat hand. "You moved bread and law. Congratulations. Perhaps you will try moving hearts next." He could not tell whether it was mockery or a kind of proposal. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile a man makes when he thinks, "Oh, F. Winter and does not dread it." Catelyn wrote from Riverrun. "Father is failing, but he hears when I speak of prudence. Edmure is learning to think like a fish, not a boy. Brynden says your scheme was bold and that he would never have thought it of you. Then he said he should have. He has more respect for you than I have seen him show any Southern man. Come when you can. If you cannot, send stories that smell like the North." He wrote back with ink that sometimes dried in his pen. He told her nothing of the moments when the city poised, like a bird on a finger. He told her of a ship that had come from White Harbor and how the men on deck had a way of standing that looked familiar and good. He told her he was careful. He told her he was not sad. He told her he slept and sometimes remembered the sound of snow. At the Eyrie, Lysa dreamed of the drop and woke in a sweat and went to hold her boy and felt calm again, as if the world were a feather bed and the only knives were in the kitchen where she could deny their existence. Peter came to her rarely and then less. Gentle words were coming from other chambers now. Yours was a door already opened and they needed fresh doors. In time, the Red Wine fleet did sail for the capital, but it came under a banner of the Stag, and Ned saw to it that their wine went into casks for celebration of the law, not sacks for the sacking of rivals. In time, the mountain was brought to heel more publicly by lords who found the south less tolerant now of men who acted like storms. In time, Robb did ride south, but not as a boy chasing plumes and revenge. He rode as a man invited to a council, and his wolf kept to the towers and the courtyards while men who had thought themselves the only players found they had to place their pieces on a board held shakily in common. There were other wars. There are always other wars. But this one did not begin with the city tearing itself and the bread turning black in men's mouths. It began with a piece of paper torn and a lever applied, and the moment when the man holding it did not let his hand slip. What men remembered of it, who lived to remember, was that hunger had been made to serve law, and law had learned to feed hunger. It was not a story men like to tell in wine, because it has fewer swords than they prefer, and so it is truer than most. On a cold morning near the year's end, Ned Stark walked along the top of the city wall and looked at the world he had refused to abandon to appetite. The sea lay out heavy and real as if no ship had ever cut it. The wind tugged at his hair like a child. He thought of his sister's bones, of Robert's heavy hand, of a woman with green eyes who had learned nothing and everything too late. He thought of a Weirwood's face and words like levers. The north waited. The south simmered. Between them a hand lay steady on a bar and pushed, not too hard, not too soft, and the door the realm had placed before itself swung, just enough to admit the light.